Zara's life was a daily battle against the harsh realities of poverty. Living in a cramped, two-room house in the congested lanes of the city, she knew the exact value of every penny. Her father was a retired clerk whose meager pension barely covered the utility bills, and her mother suffered from chronic illnesses that required expensive medication. Despite the crushing weight of their financial struggles, Zara possessed a rare, dignified beauty and a heart full of resilience. She worked as a tutor for neighborhood children, stitching clothes late into the night to add whatever little she could to the household income. She never complained, believing that patience was the ultimate virtue. On the other side of the grand city lived Zain. Zain was the sole heir to a massive business empire spanning textiles, real estate, and shipping. Raised in the lap of luxury, he had never known the sting of an unfulfilled desire. To Zain, money wasn't just a tool for comfort, it was the ultimate measure of a person's worth. He walked with an air of absolute superiority, firmly believing that poverty was a disease born out of laziness and a lack of ambition. His world was one of high-end luxury cars, five-star galas, and people who constantly flattered him to win his favor. The collision of these two entirely different worlds was a twist of fate. It happened through Zain's grandmother, a pious and traditional woman who visited Zara's neighborhood for a charity drive. During her visit, she suddenly collapsed due to a drop in blood pressure. While others panicked or stood at a distance, Zara rushed to her aid, using her basic knowledge of first aid, comforting the elderly lady, and ensuring she reached the hospital safely. Impressed by Zara's selflessness, grace, and upbringing, Zain's grandmother made a firm decision. Zara was the only girl worthy of becoming the daughter-in-law of the elite mansion. When the proposal reached Zara's humble home, her parents were overwhelmed with joy and disbelief. They felt their prayers had been answered. Zain, however, resisted fiercely. "She is a beggar compared to us, Daddy," he argued angrily in their lavish drawing room. "What will my friends say? She doesn't know our etiquette, our lifestyle, or our language." But his grandmother stood firm, threatening to disinherit him if he refused her final wish. Trapped by his greed for the family fortune, Zain reluctantly agreed to the marriage. But in his heart, a dark resentment took root. He blamed Zara for forcing him into a union he despised. Chapter 2. The Gilded Cage. The wedding was a grand affair, the kind that dominated social media and lifestyle magazines for weeks. Zara looked like a princess in her bridal attire, but beneath her veil, her heart raced with anxiety. She was stepping into a world she knew nothing about. The very first night in Zain's massive mansion shattered all of Zara's hopes for a peaceful life. As soon as the bedroom door closed, Zain's expression turned cold and mocking. He looked at her with pure disgust. "Don't think for a single second that you belong here," Zain said, tossing his sherwani jacket onto a chair. "You are here because of my grandmother's stubbornness. You brought nothing but your poverty into this house, and that is exactly how I will treat you. You are an outsider." Zara's eyes filled with tears, but she swallowed her pride and remained silent. She hoped that with time, kindness, and dedication, she could win his heart. But she was severely mistaken. As the weeks turned into months, Zain made it his personal mission to humiliate her. He kept a strict eye on everything she did. If she hesitated while using the complex silver cutlery at the dining table, he would mock her openly in front of the servants. "Look at her," he would laugh sneeringly. "You can take a girl out of the slums, but you can't take the slums out of the girl. Be careful, she might accidentally steal the silver." Zain restricted her budget to a humiliating degree. While he spent millions on his friends, he demanded a receipt for every single rupee Zara spent on household necessities. He refused to let her buy decent clothes, forcing her to wear old, simple outfits, and then ridiculed her for looking shabby and cheap when guests arrived. The mental torture worsened when Zara's father fell gravely ill. Desperate, Zara begged Zain for financial help to fund her father's surgery. Zain laughed, a cold, hollow sound that echoed through the room. "Why should I waste my hard-earned money on a family of parasites? Your father lived like a beggar, let him see what a beggar's medical care looks like. I won't give you a single dime." Zara had to sell her mother's last remaining gold bangles to pay for the treatment, but the delay was costly. Her father passed away just a week later. The grief was suffocating, and Zain's complete lack of empathy broke something vital inside her. Instead of comforting his grieving wife, he complained that her crying was ruining the atmosphere of his house. Chapter 3. The Breaking Point. The final blow came on a stormy winter evening. Zain's corporate partners and elite friends were gathered at the mansion for a high-profile dinner party. Zayn had strictly ordered Zara to stay locked in her room upstairs, ashamed to introduce her to his wealthy associates. However, later in the evening, one of the housemaids accidentally spilled hot soup on a guest. The maid began to cry, terrified of being fired. Hearing the commotion from upstairs, Zara's natural instinct to help took over. She walked down the grand staircase, dressed in a simple, faded linen suit, and gently comforted the maid, taking the soiled cloth to clean the mess herself. Zayn froze when he saw her. His friends began to whisper, snickering at the sight of the billionaire's wife looking like a domestic servant. After the guests left, Zayn's rage exploded. He dragged Zara by her arm into the living room, his face twisted in fury. "You embarrassed me in front of the most powerful people in the city," he roared, throwing her violently onto the floor. "You are a curse on my name. You smell of poverty, Zara. No matter how much luxury I give you, you will always remain a cheap, low-class girl who belongs in the dirt." Zara sat on the cold marble floor, her palms bruised, looking up at the man she had tried so hard to love. The constant emotional abuse, the mockery of her background, the insults hurled at her deceased father, and now this physical aggression, it was finally too much. The fear in her eyes died, replaced by a cold, unwavering resolve. "You were right, Zayn," Zara said, her voice eerily calm as she stood up, dusting off her simple clothes. "I don't belong here, but it's not because I am too low for this house. It's because this house, and your black heart, are too low for my dignity." Without taking a single piece of jewelry, without taking a single extra dress, and leaving behind the luxury bags Zayn's grandmother had gifted her, Zara walked out of the mansion. The heavy rain soaked her within seconds, but as the iron gates of the estate closed behind her, she felt a profound sense of freedom she hadn't experienced in years. Chapter 4. The Changing Winds. Zara returned to her mother's small house. The initial days were incredibly difficult. The neighborhood whispered about her failed marriage, and financial survival was tougher than ever. But Zara refused to be a victim. She used her skills in stitching and embroidery to start a small, home-based boutique. She worked 18 hours a day, channeling all her pain, anger, and heartbreak into her designs. Slowly, her unique, intricate patterns gained popularity. A wealthy local businesswoman noticed her talent and offered to partner with her. Within 2 years, Zara's brand grew from a small room to a prominent boutique in the city's most upscale commercial district. She became financially independent, respected, and successful, all on her own merit. Meanwhile, Zayn's world began to unravel. Arrogance has a way of blinding a man to his own downfalls. Believing he was invincible, Zayn began making highly risky, aggressive investments without consulting his board of directors or financial advisors. He poured billions into a massive international real estate venture that turned out to be a fraudulent scheme. Simultaneously, a massive fire broke out at his primary textile mills, destroying uninsured inventory worth millions. Seeking a quick recovery, Zayn took massive loans from private lenders, staking his family mansion and his remaining company shares as collateral. But luck had completely abandoned him. His new product lines failed in the market, and his partners betrayed him, stealing the company's remaining liquid assets and fleeing the country. Within 3 short years of Zara's departure, the great Zayn empire collapsed like a house of cards. The banks moved in quickly. The luxury cars were seized, the company offices were locked by court orders, and finally, the grand mansion was auctioned off to pay his debts. The friends who used to drink his expensive wine and praise his name vanished overnight. When Zayn called them for help, his calls went unanswered, or he was met with cold rejections. Stripped of everything, Zayn was forced to rent a tiny, suffocating room in a dilapidated slum, the very kind of neighborhood he used to look down upon with utter disgust. He had to walk on foot in the scorching heat, looking for low-paying jobs just to afford a single meal a day. The sting of poverty, which he had so brutally used as a weapon against Zara, was now his own daily reality. Chapter 5. The Reunion and Penance. One rainy afternoon, 4 years after they had parted ways, Zara was leaving her main boutique to get into her car. She was dressed elegantly, exuding confidence and grace, surrounded by her staff. As she walked toward her car, she noticed a commotion near the parking lot. A man in tattered, soiled clothes had accidentally tripped and dropped a heavy box of delivery goods he was carrying for a nearby store. The shopkeeper was screaming at him, threatening to deduct the damages from his miserable daily wage. The delivery man was on his knees, desperately picking up the scattered items, his hands trembling, his head bowed in deep humiliation. Zara walked over, intending to pay the shopkeeper for the damages out of kindness. Please stop shouting at him, she said gently, handing the shopkeeper a few high-denomination notes. This should cover everything. The delivery man froze upon hearing that voice. It was a voice he had heard in his dreams, a voice he had once silenced with his cruel arrogance. He slowly raised his eyes. It was Zane. His face was gaunt, his eyes hollow, and his hair unkempt. The contrast between them was stark and poetic. The poor girl was now the picture of success and nobility, while the proud billionaire was kneeling in the dirt at her feet. Zane's breath caught in his throat. He felt an overwhelming urge to run away, to hide his face from the woman he had so deeply wronged. The shame was suffocating. He scrambled to his feet, turning away quickly to walk into the rain. Zane, Zara called out, her voice filled with profound shock. Zane stopped, his shoulders shaking as silent tears began to mix with the raindrops falling on his face. He couldn't move forward, and he couldn't face her. Zara walked up to him, standing just a few feet away, looking at the broken shell of the man who had once ruled her life with tyranny. Slowly, Zane turned around. He couldn't look her in the eye. Instead, he dropped to his knees right there on the wet pavement, burying his face in his rough, blistered hands. I am sorry, Zara. I am so deeply sorry, Zane sobbed, his voice cracking with years of accumulated pain, guilt, and regret. Please, don't look at me like this. This is my punishment. The universe is punishing me for what I did to you. Zara watched him, her heart heavy with a mixture of pity and sorrow. There was no anger left in her, only a profound realization of how fragile human existence truly is. Stand up, Zane, she said softly. The street is no place for a human being to kneel. Zane shook his head, refusing to rise. He looked up at her through tear-filled eyes, his voice trembling with absolute sincerity. No, Zara, let me speak. I need to say this, even if you never forgive me. I used to think that being rich made me a god. I thought your poverty was your fault, a sign of weakness. But now I know the truth. Wealth and poverty are entirely in the hands of the Almighty. He gives to whomever He wills, and He strips it away from whomever He wills in the blink of an eye. Man has no power over it. He wiped his face, his voice filled with deep remorse. I tortured you because you were poor. I insulted your parents, I crushed your dignity, and I threw you out into the rain. And look at me today, I am begging for a single meal in the same rain. I learned the hard way that a person's worth is not measured by their bank balance, but by the kindness in their heart. I was the beggar all along, Zara. I was poor in character, poor in soul, and poor in love. Zara stood silently, listening to his confession. She saw the absolute sincerity in his broken spirit. The arrogant boy was dead. In his place stood a man who had been completely humbled by the harsh realities of life. She stepped closer and gently placed a hand on his shoulder, urging him to stand up. This time, he did. I forgave you a long time ago, Zane, Zara said, offering him a sad but comforting smile. Holding on to anger only burns the person holding it. I don't wish ill upon you. I never did. Zara opened her purse, pulled out a card, and handed it to him. My company is looking for a logistics manager. It's an honest job with a decent salary. It will help you get back on your feet. If you are willing to work hard and live with honesty, come to my office tomorrow. Zane looked at the card in his trembling hand, and then at Zara, who was walking toward her car. She had not used her wealth to humiliate him, she had used it to lift him up from the very dirt he had once thrown her into. As Zara's car drove away into the bustling city traffic, Zane stood in the rain, clutching the card tightly against his chest. He looked up at the gray sky, offering a silent prayer of gratitude. He had lost his worldly empire, but in the ruins of his arrogance, he had finally found his humanity.